Oh, I believe I'm going. Yes, it's a little sparse tonight, but welcome to the December monthly live stream. So far, it's just me, and you can't even see me because my webcam isn't working, and I didn't figure that out until 10 minutes before go time when I didn't have time to troubleshoot. And, well, I'm a few days shy of rebuilding my system as it is, so I'll just work it all out then. I'm not really wanting to do a whole bunch of stuff. I'm just going to reinstall everything. So right now, it's just me. No one showing up in the chat room as of yet, but Hoplu says he'll be on in about 30 minutes. We'll have Chris on as soon as he gets a Dr. Pepper from McDonald's, because that's important. And also, we have Pierre, P-E-A-I-R. You've seen him in the monthly Q&As. He's asked a lot of those. Hello, Zero Binary. But he's a supporter on Subscribestar, and something weird happened, and I don't even know when this was, so this might have been a while back, and I'm going to apologize to all my Subscribestar supporters because of this, but something happened and they had reset all the roles to the default instead of all the ones that I had set up. Hello, Son of Sothis. But, so anyway, I had to go back in there and I had to reassign their default roles to the tiered roles I have set up, and I could do that for the individual tiers like $1, $2, $5. For some reason, I can't do it with the main one where they have, at Subscribestar. I had that as at supporters. So by doing it this way, I can tag the Patreon and the Subscribestar people at the same time. Hello, David R. and JC Armitage. But I could tag them at the same time, and so I can do that again with the tiers, but I can't do it with the main one. So I'm gonna have to remember from this point on, when I tag supporters, I also have to tag Subscribestar too. And if I forget, I apologize. You Subscribestar people, please remind me of this in case I start forgetting about that. So, oh, let's see. Is there signs of life in the Discord? Yeah, not really much. So we'll have Hoplu and Chris, and hopefully Pierre if he gets in. And I guess it's just me in the chat room until then, without even seeing my face. But I hope all of you who celebrate Thanksgiving had a great Thanksgiving and stuffed yourself full of lots of turkey. And I actually kind of surprised myself because, of course, the Monday after Thanksgiving, I had a doctor's checkup. And so I'm stepping on the scales, just like, oh my God, how much did I put on over Thanksgiving? And despite stuffing myself full, I actually dropped below 200 for the first time, I think, since the accident. That was like 13 years ago. Because, after the accident, I put on a bunch because that helps. Hello, my 2 cents in the house. And Truth and Downfall. We'll get to questions in a minute, but let me just finish with what I was saying. I guess I pretty much was finished. I'm 199.3, but after you have an accident or something like that, and I was sedentary for like a year and a half while I was recovering, had a bunch of different rounds of surgery, so I got up to like 220 and a bit of it. I've been like around 205, 210 for the last few years, and finally got below 200. So yeah, it's awesome to have my 2 cents in. He is another one of us who's gone over to bittubers.com, and he's been putting his videos over there as well. So if you want to go over there and watch him over there and not be on YouTube. I know YouTube doesn't like me saying that, but, well, maybe if they ran their business a little better, we wouldn't have people doing it. All right, so Truth and Downfall, are you pro-immigration? Well, the libertarian position is not so much that we're pro this or pro that or anything but pro freedom. It's not necessarily that pro doesn't mean like, oh, let's go grab a whole bunch of foreigners and bring them to the country. No, if they want to move here, then yes. If they don't, then yes. If people in the country want to leave, then we have that. Oh, you just did a BitTubers exclusive. Nice. We'll have to go and check that out. But yeah, it's not about it's not about saying whether something is good or bad. It's about saying that people should have the freedom to do it. Like, I am completely in favor of drug legalization. I do not think it's a good idea to do heroin and cocaine. I am not in favor of doing heroin and cocaine, but I am in favor of the freedom to do it. I'm against the prohibition and saying, oh, you have the right to put whatever you want to in your own body. So, if stuff like that. So, yeah, I am pro freedom of movement is probably a better way to say that. So, I am keeping Windows down to a minimum so I can keep the bandwidth going. Otherwise, I'd pop over to BitTubers and take a look and see what my 2 cents had done for an exclusive. But he says, you're free to immigrate if you want to, but no one's going to pay you to immigrate or force you not to immigrate. Yep. How can you support immigration when white people are the only ones who will ever implement? Now, come on. That's not true. That's not true. You want to find some people who are against socialism? Talk to the Venezuelans who are coming up. Those are people who will give you all the dirt on socialism. Have you ever noticed that people don't get into rickety little boats and risk their lives to escape capitalism? No, this is a complete myth. Libertarianism is not just a white person's thing. I've been through all this, and I've shown the statistics on this. They do what they want to skew everything, but it's not true. Yes, it has more to do with where you live than what race you are. If you're in Southern California or along the coast up to Sacramento and San Francisco and all that way, then you're more likely to be a socialist or Democrat, no matter what race you are. And then if you're, in, South Carolina, you're more likely to be a conservative, no matter what race you are. So, that's the thing. Hispanics vote 70% per guy. Hispanics where? Hispanics where? What they're doing is they're just concentrating on all these Hispanics that are, like I said, in Southern California, like a lot of them are. But when you get, when you look at Hispanics in Texas or, like I said, South Carolina or other places, you don't see that. You don't see that. So, Brazil has a big libertarian movement. It's very diverse ethnically. They've always had a good, active libertarians down there. I mean, they've needed it. It's a shame they haven't been able to get more done down there because there's a lot of problems down there. Order in Madness, this is Pierre. Stuck in traffic. I'll be on in less than half an hour. Okay, so things are probably going to get jumping around 8:30 when it's more than just me yakking my mouth in here. So, yeah, hopefully it's all working for you now, Pierre, and you can get in. I mean, I can always give it to you manually if worse comes to worse, but I'd rather fix the problem so that other people who donate through Subscribestar can get in too if they want, because that's the whole point of this. So hopefully I've got it fixed. Yeah, but I mean, I don't know how many more times I can debunk all of the immigration crap. Why Texas will and California has turned blue. California turned blue without the Hispanics. Texas isn't even making moves towards turning blue. Yeah. And I mean, you've got plenty of other blue districts that are completely white bread. Have you ever noticed that it's the rich people who tend to be socialist, and the working class people tend to be more conservative or libertarian? That's really what it is. And when you're in, okay, I'll tell you about North Carolina. Back when my parents first got married, they got married like in 59, moved into the house I grew up in 60. At the time, and really on into the turn of the century, you could not elect a Republican in North Carolina for love nor money. We got into a point where we were kind of trading off. We'd have a Republican governor and then a Democrat. But I think 2010 was the first time both state houses have been majority Republican. And in 1960, it was all Democrat. And so even though my parents were conservatives and they were Republicans, they registered Democrat just so they could have a say in who would be in the election. Because whoever was nominated as the Democrat in the primary would just sail right in the general election. And that's basically the way it is in, places like Southern California and a lot of those. If you want to have a say in who's the congressman, then you'd better be voting in that Democratic primary, because they've got all the districts gerrymandered and drawn to where the Republican doesn't have a chance. So don't just look at party affiliation for that. How you doing, Chris?
Hey, sorry.
That's all right. Dr. Pepper's an important thing.
I had to get something to drink, and the roads, it's snowing pretty badly, so the roads are bad.
J.C. Armitage, voting does not affect what policies get put into place. We've drilled this fact into status millions of times already, so knock it off with your talking points. Yeah, it's... there are a couple of things I think that voting might be effective for. Who are we waiting for? Well, we're not waiting, we're going, but we're expecting Hoplu to come in probably about 20 minutes, and Pierre said he's on his way too. So. Yeah, if the party's good, there'd be more of an election.
I learned another reason why I hate government intervention in the healthcare industry.
Why is that?
My anti-anxiety medication, it ran out of refills, and while they will get me an emergency refill, I can't get a long-term refill until I actually go in and see a doctor, and that's going to be difficult because my new job requires me to work entire weekdays, and they don't schedule weekend appointments, so I have to write down everything, and I'm just a temp guy there, and I'm brand new, and I don't want to be being too much of a burden on them. So yeah.
Well, and it's hard when, like, if you need an emergency supply of something, because, like, if it's Medicaid or even a lot of the Obamacare plans, they'll pay for, like, the 90-day supply. If something happens and you need that extra 7-day supply, you're paying for that yourself.
Yeah, well, not that. And also, it's sertraline. It's like, that's not... I looked it up. That's not the most dangerous thing out there. It's surprising how many things that are strictly prescription drugs actually aren't that dangerous for you. And in all honesty, it'd be much easier if they were just over the counter.
Yeah, and look how dangerous acetaminophen is. That stuff is hell on your liver. If voting worked, they'd make it illegal. Yep, that's a good one. But one thing is, like, if, and it wasn't enough for this, but this has happened other times as well. In the last primary we had, our county had a 0.5-cent sales tax increase, and so I went to vote that down. And they had really mobilized the state. Well, first of all, they stick it in the primary ballot, which always has low turnout, and it's always the But they'd really mobilized people, like, this is going to education, this is for the children, vote for the children, and the schools were actually pushing that on the parents. The schools like, yes, you got to vote for this.
I hate it when schools do that, when they try to indoctrinate their children. Like, I was in high school when the whole Scott Walker thing was going on, and they were actually telling children and parents, get involved, get rid of Scott Walker. He's taken away our teachers' freedoms.
If you're taxpayer funded, you can't be taking a position on anything like that. That's just a basic principle.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Scott Walker wasn't infringing on unions or anything, and he actually still allowed them to keep most of their power. He just wanted to take away their ability to collectively bargain because it's economically unsustainable.
Well, it was the fact that you had the unions negotiating with the boards, and who were most of the board members? They were union people. Yep. So you had the same people on both sides of the table. Yeah. So, all right, Rika recommends some lemon balm tea. I don't know if that's for anxiety or what. Truth and Downfall. Why do you think this country has changed so much since 1970? Well, it's just continuing on the same slide it has really since the founding, but especially since the Civil War. Not that I want to invoke that so we get off in a tangent about the Civil War again, but
there were some. I will say this. There were some fear rebellion, but usually, government knew its place.
You're cutting out there, Darth.
Clear that people were uprising. The problem came with the American Civil War. government established, that nope, you can't rebel against the
Yeah, you can't
rebel against the
do
federal government because that's treason.
you can't do the rightful remedy, as Thomas Jefferson called it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. J.C. Armitage.
It's one thing I
Republican policies like bump stock bans and red flag laws. Yeah, no, I've abandoned your stupid cult of the omnipotent state, and nothing you say will ever get me back. Yeah.
Well, I was about to say this, going back to Thomas Jefferson. I hate about people when they bring up Thomas Jefferson is when they misquote him on saying.
You are really dropping out. It's really bad tonight. I'm getting like 3 words and then silence.
People with Thomas Jefferson like to say. Thomas Jefferson himself said that we should scrap the Constitution and start over. There should be a rebellion every 20 years.
Yep. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. It is its natural manure.
Yeah.
Why would we want to discourage people watching pornography? Who cares? Let them have fun.
Yeah.
Oh, what does degeneracy actually mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it makes it sound like something's breaking down, like metal's rusting or something. And no, that's not going to happen just because people watch porn.
I will say this, Shane. Going back to the thing you said, who I have sadly lost a lot of respect for, was a guy called Telltale. He had a podcast on where he was interviewing the guy.
Okay, I completely missed who you're talking about. I don't know why you're not roboting. You're just dropping out for a few seconds every few seconds.
Oh, well, Telltale Atheist did a video where he had the guy who had the bite model, who invented the bite model, and they were talking about, whether Trump is a cult leader or not. And guess what? The guy who invented the bite model, he said libertarians were a cult.
So what's the bite model?
It stands for behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotion control, and it's how you determine a cult. And it's pretty funny because I brought this up in the comment sections. I said, dude, that makes no sense because libertarians are the political equivalent of atheists because we reject that. And when I pointed that at the comments, guess what one guy said? And he had the stupidest answer ever. He said, no, you guys are like flat earthers because you continuously deny the existence of a state, just like how flat earthers continuously
No, we don't deny the existence of the state, just the legitimacy.
That's what I pointed out. I pointed him out. I said, that's not what it is. We acknowledge there's a thing called the state. What we don't believe in is that they have this legitimate power. By that logic, I could make the logic, well, then by that logic, then we have to acknowledge God exists because Christianity exists.
Rika, welcome. And I'm also concluding that Truth and Downfall is a Poe. I mean, poor makes people leftist. Yeah. How you doing, Rika?
Good. How about you?
Oh, I'm all right. And see, David R., I think, sums it up well. Degeneracy equals, I don't like it, therefore it will ruin everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other Rika says whatever someone else doesn't like.
Yeah, and going back to what I said about Telltale, it's like, and the sad thing is that Telltale, while he didn't say it directly, he had this look on his face that basically said, "Oh yeah, I agree with that." It's like, why? That's really what saddens me about people like him. It's like, you guys are so good when it comes to debunking religious bullshit, but you bring up politics and economics, you throw your brain out the door.
Yeah, the Friedrich is like, something that has existed since humanity exists is degeneracy, eye rolls. Yeah, I mean, you have all of these, ancient statues of, giant boobs and giant phalluses and everything else. And all of the artsy-fartsy people are going like, oh, well, these were their fertility gods and goddesses, and they hoped that they would bring abundance. No, it was their porn.
Oh, yeah.
It was their
In
porn.
fact, actually, Shane, I've actually read a theory which I kind of agree with. The reason why Christians in their early days, and to a lesser extent to this day, were so puritanical, and they basically their policy was anything that's fun and gives you physical pleasure is bad, was partially because it was a giant middle finger to the Romans who had previously persecuted them, and the Romans were infamous, for basically saying, it's like, hey, if as long as you're not hurting anyone, if you want to masturbate in public, go ahead, as long as you're not hurting anyone.
Yeah, but even then, they weren't really crazy about it until the Protestants and especially the Calvinists. So.
Oh yeah, it's hard. It's hard to believe a lot of religious people love to say, "Oh, we're against religion," the left and all that, just like you guys are. No, if you read historically, the Calvinists and the Protestants, they are some of the biggest collectivists you'll ever find. The only difference is that instead of saying property is theft because it belongs to the people, they say property is theft because it belongs to God.
No, Fish, the dropping birth rates, that's been debunked 8 ways from Tuesday. So, Hoplu!
I'm on 10 minutes early.
Hey! We were
How's
all
everyone
waiting
doing?
with bated breath.
And apparently nobody's responding because I keep dropping off.
No,
Yeah, everyone else seems fine so far. It's just Darth. So I think I fixed that little dollocking problem on my end. So
I don't know.
hopefully it doesn't come back after I rebuild. But
Then again, my Discord's been kind of wonky lately.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it completely crashed, I think, yesterday for a little bit.
Yeah.
So, Rika, that's what you sound like.
Yep.
Hmm.
You've been on before, haven't you, Rika?
Yeah.
We've heard you
She
before.
she has, but she barely said anything the last time, if I recall correctly.
Sorry, I'm adjusting volume. We were a little overpowering there, Rika, but nothing I can't fix on my end.
Because
all right, let's see.
Because she sighed like the Kajagoogoo song.
So I've been, for the past few days, dealing with the ban porn crowd, which I guess you guys are talking about already.
Yeah, we've got some of that going on in the chat room, like Truth and Downfall. They've done studies on this. Notice the weasel words. There's a reason porn is pushed on the masses by the elites. It makes them more liberal and obedient like shit. Okay, wait a minute. Porn is pushed on the masses. What was basically the first thing that all these decentralized file sharing sites were spreading around in abundance? I mean, come on.
Yeah, and also it makes them more liberal and obedient. I guess Truth and Downfall's is one of those, moralistic,
And we're dropping out again.
I'm not trying to judge, but quite a number of leftists that are anti-porn too, especially in the SJ. Porn exploits the women's.
I want to hear a solution. There's no problem.
Yeah.
People can get married when they want. They can have kids when they want. They can get divorced if it isn't working out. There's no problem here. No, Friedrich, the Roman Empire ended because its government was doing the same kind of things ours is, like debasing the currency, and just spending all these massive social programs.
Like, people get families is almost entirely because of things like the
well, now Hoplu's dropping out.
Labor regularly just decimating people's futures. Like, leaving them destitute, leaving them turn to sort of these immediate satisfaction things like video games, etc., as opposed and like the thing about porn is that if you make it unavailable to people, it's not.
Okay, I have no idea why these dropouts are happening.
Oh, dang.
I'm going to say...
The Streisand distance or something, it'll just...
Oh, yeah.
Now, there was a setting here somewhere. I could drop the quality.
In fact, I bring this up all the time is... What was that guy's name? people
Which
were
guy's
going-
name?
Richard
Richard
Spencer.
Spencer.
I'm bringing this up with Philip Streisand. A lot of SJWs are saying, well, yeah, they had every right. He was a racist, stop him from speaking and brainwashing people. And I'm like, people,
But like, this
Yeah.
isn't even about the somehow successfully. That just means people are gonna turn to things like all cigarettes, promiscuous sex, or they're just gonna engage in the classic tradition. Oh, sorry, did I say themselves? I mean harming others. You
All right,
know?
if I can find where this setting is, I'm gonna try to cut down the.
Also, Friedrich, I don't know if he's being serious or not, but he said the Roman Empire ended because of degeneracy. Oh yeah, and totally not the fact that they overexpanded their military and their senate and emperor became so corrupt and bloated that they were spending more money than they earned. Yeah, that totally had nothing to do with it. It was because they were It's because they were publicly masturbating in public.
And inflating the currency and having unsustainable social programs and yeah.
Yep.
Change the
you've got
server
a
region.
ton.
I don't know what my server region is.
Truth and downfall. Yes, I'm a moralist. Great argument. Well, look, I'm not against, a moral society. The problem is well, is when people say, well, moral, it's like, well, no, you got to apply it to first principle. We know not murdering people is moral because murder violates the first principle, but banning pornography, how does that violate the first principle of self-contradiction and whatnot?
All right, I changed the Discord server from US East to US South, and we'll see if that fixes it.
Oh, yeah, let's see if
Did you hear what I said, Shane, or?
Porn is the longer version of people complaining about books, music, TV, video games, etc.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I mean the thing that people say about porn, they said the same thing about that with video games, movies, TV, and whatnot.
Yeah. I mean, all I have to do is tell the truth about what it was when I was growing up, which was Bugs Bunny cartoons. They were honestly saying this about Bugs Bunny cartoons.
Fun fact, Shane, a very, very long time ago, you know what a lot of famous and well-respected philosophers were saying would be the downfall of humankind? Writing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Socrates said the written word was terrible because people weren't memorizing things.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, I'm paraphrasing, he said it's making people lazy and not do that. The only way your mind's going to expand is if you memorize everything, and you can't do that if you write.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what people are saying today. Oh, well, these people have all these contacts in their phones, and so they don't memorize people's phone numbers anymore. It's like,
nowadays.
It's exactly the same argument. This has been thousands of years.
Oh yeah, and
Yep.
and here's the thing. That's actually the reason why. I've read why a lot of people back in those days had low literacy and writing rates, and contrary to popular belief, it wasn't because they were stupid people, picking their noses and burning witches. It's because in a lot of cases they were actually forbidden from learning to read and write because the state thought, if we let people read and write, they're going to be stupid and dumb and something like that. So only state-approved scribes were allowed to learn to read and write.
I was going to say, I thought scribes were the only ones who really knew how to read at that time.
Yeah.
Yes, this is the Bogosity Discord that we're on. But in order to join, you have to be a supporter on either Patreon or Subscribestars. So.
Or a co-host, which I'm both.
Yeah.
So. Although he hasn't had co-hosts on for a while simply because of time reasons.
Yeah, it's just been really crazy for me these last few months.
Yeah, there was this really cool, there was that one really cool guy, I forgot his name, who used to be on along, but then he left a long time ago.
You mean Tim Dyson?
Well,
or Dave Turcotte?
What?
Dave Turcotte.
Yeah, I think that's who he was. He was awesome, especially
Dave's awesome, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but then he left, not because he disagreed with you anymore, just because he's like, I'm trying to improve my life and I'm getting sick of all this drama, so I'm just gonna leave it.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with that,
Yeah,
there's
I
nothing wrong.
don't blame
I
people.
agree.
It takes a certain viewpoint to be able
Yeah,
to handle
yeah,
this.
debunking political and religious bogosity is not an easy job.
How about narcissistic and sociopathic individuals in an app society? How does it work? Well, there's no harm they can do because they can't violate the NAP.
Yeah. I
Yep.
mean,
Whereas now they're called politicians. They run for office. I mean, really, go and look up narcissistic personality disorder. Look at all of the qualities, and as you're reading down that list of all the aspects of it, think about any given politician and see how many they fit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, exactly, JC. What has the state done to stop them other than institutionalize them?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Technology has stopped natural selection. This
parent your
degeneracy isn't
own
going to
kids are
end well.
cool.
Yeah, this is another thing we keep hearing about how the whole evolution has stopped thing. Well, the whole idea of evolution is lots of things die, and the ones that survive are a little bit different. I mean, that's all there is. Evolution is not some kind of vast, holy manna from heaven stuff that needs to keep going. It just makes you a little easier to survive, but evolution gave us this brain, and so we're using that brain to survive very well.
That's why I hate like those eugenics. Like, there's too many stupid people in this world and all that. There's a lot of stupid people getting
And
famous,
we're back to dropping out.
People getting famous, but I don't think their numbers have increased. I mean,
well, it's like people have this idea.
The internet and all that. He's like.
People have this idea that Darwin actually debunked, which is the idea of evolution ascending this ladder, and there's like this next stage of evolution that we have to get through. Evolution doesn't work that way.
Yeah,
evolution doesn't care if you friggin' die. Your species could go extinct. It's like, okay, that just means someone else can come in and get your. Evolution doesn't care about you.
Yeah, extinct. That's not because your species was weak or anything. It just meant something than you.
All right, there has got to be something I can do on my end to stop these dropouts.
And here's another thing too: is contrary to popular belief, de-evolution doesn't. If something happens in the grand scheme of things that causes humans to go back to their, that doesn't mean we're de-evolving. That just means this creature gave us an edge that being regular humans didn't have.
All right, maybe this is something that'll sort itself out after I rebuild everything. Is eugenics a necessary measure to an extent, or abortion necessary for what? And exactly, Manny, parent your own kids and instill them with the values that you think. Yeah,
I know. It's like, I mean, that's why I laugh so much at those people that are like, oh, but if we don't regulate the internet, what's gonna stop little Sydney from accidentally seeing lesbians eating each other out? It's like, are you paying attention to what they're doing?
Yeah.
No,
Well, that's like what they're saying now with this whole COPPA stuff, and it's like, oh, kids are seeing advertising as they're tracking. It's like, well, you have the tools to stop that. You can monitor what they're doing. You can make sure they watch YouTube Kids and not the regular YouTube. You can put an ad blocker on. This stuff isn't difficult.
I don't know about YouTube Kids though, because they're infamous for having some really bad stuff. But then again, that was more of an exploit, though, not because of YouTube Kids, the channel. Actually, looking back now, when I read that, I actually read the reason why YouTube Kids had a lot of that gore and sex stuff on it wasn't because YouTube Kids was bad. It was because parents were being stupid and they assumed, oh, it says YouTube's Kids channel, therefore it's YouTube's Kids. No, it's just regular YouTube. It's just
Oh.
All right, I'm cutting off Truth and Downfall because no, this is not how evolution does not work on short time scales like that. We are basically not really that genetically different from humans that existed 50,000 years ago. We know a bit more. That's it. No, crime did not get purged because of Europeans executing criminals. It happened because we became a more enlightened society, understanding more about science and the world around us and about universal ethics and things like that.
not to mention a lot of the stuff that the old Europeans used to execute people for. A lot of things that they would execute you for back in those days wouldn't even be considered crimes for these days. Like, for instance, teaching the Bible a slightly different way than the established church, you know.
Yeah. Or even that for a while, they were like, executions of people whose only crime was to own an English copy of the Bible.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, for a long time the rules were the Bible can only be in 3 languages: Latin, Greek, or Aramaic. Anything else, that's heresy.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, because Tyndale was executed, wasn't he, for translating the Bible? Am I remembering that correctly?
I think so, And the irony is that when the Protestants, took power in England, the oppressed became the oppressors because then they made a law saying, yeah, we're going to end this rule by executing anyone who doesn't teach the Bible in English.
JC Armitage, YouTube Kids, considered a guy who posted literal child abuse to be kid-friendly. Well, you're just going to have to pay attention to what your kids are watching. You're actually going to have to get off your butt and do this thing called parenting. There's no substitute for it.
Yeah.
YouTube's not going to do it for you. Google's not going to do it for you. And the government certainly isn't going to do it for you, although they'll be happy to, take your money and whatever power you want to give them in the name of doing that.
I will say this, Shane. One thing I do kind of sort of agree with some of those people that are saying not like the good old days is, from what I'm researching, a lot of people are becoming more terrible parents because it seems... Although I think that's partially because in our PC culture played a big role for this. It's because it's no longer correct, to actually be a...
And you dropped out again.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not against,
Hold on. It's not PC to be a what?
I was about to say that it's not PC nowadays to actually be a proper parent now,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's like I'm not against, kids, being experimenting and independent and all that, but the thing they're forgetting about is that you're not just supposed to let them be free and run wild with no consequence. They're actually supposed to experience that, like a perfectly good example that a lot of people bring up. If your kid wants to go to school just look like a clown, say, okay, fine, but don't come crying to me when everyone makes fun of you about that. Whereas today they're taught, if your kid wants to go to school dressed up like a clown, not only should you allow it, you should encourage it and tell them, oh yeah, all the other children, they're just wrong. It's like, no, just
jeez.
All right, Fish. People are not poor because they're genetic defects. They're poor because of basically the conditions that they're in. And I mean, we can go all day about the causes of poverty. It basically boils down to government, but this is Pierre. I had trouble joining the live stream from the Discord, but the family planning is necessary just so they don't have children that they can't afford. But that's just helping. That's one thing that can help them out of poverty.
Speaking of family planning, a lot of people have asked me, well, what's your opinion on Planned Parenthood? And you know what I said? I said, well, I think they're a good organization, but I think it's wrong they're getting government subsidies. And people are like, but why? Are you one of those religious people? No, it's just nobody should be getting government subsidies, whether they're a good organization or not. If they're a good organization, they should be more than capable of raising funds or making profit on their own. In all honesty, if someone comes up and says, oh, but without government subsidies, this company or organization will go under, I'm like, that's not an excuse. That's basically a sign that, okay, you're doing something wrong, buddy. Did I cut out for you, Shane?
I'm trying to see. Okay, no, Pierre, I see you in the $5 supporters, so you should see the live stream VC unless something is still going massively wrong. So just let me know in the chat if you can't get into the live stream VC. Oh, individualism is way increased in the past few hundred years.
Yeah, despite what the capital corporations and all that, and people don't want that. No, that's not what they're wanting. They actually talk to the people who are in the Hong Kong movement, and they're protesting because they want the government out of their economics. They want more free market capitalism.
Planned Parenthood started as a eugenics program, didn't it? I don't know if it started as a eugenics program. It started by a eugenicist. Is giving people a choice.
And one of the biggest misconceptions. Say, oh, you have a kid and you don't think you can handle it? Well, just get rid of it. Just get your body after all. No, they just say that's one of the many options out there. They. And I mean, we took Planned Parenthood, and they did say, and there's 3 options you have, and one thing I do like that I really wish accept is that there are negative consequences. They're usually not physical, but they are mental and emotional. I will say that's my only problem with the pro-choice movement is that
well, the pro-choice movement is one thing, but it's also associated with, government has to pay for everything, so let's have government pay for, abortions and birth control and everything else. So
that I am against. Against. I am against for it because it's not just because of that.
Yeah, you're dropping out again. I'm not sure why that's happening. Fish, is family planning or Planned Parenthood the same thing? Planned Parenthood is the name of an organization, and family planning is just kind of a concept.
I mean, yeah, but I would say that's only because today people equate democracy with freedom, so they assume, oh, well, if we're democratic, that means we're free. I think the core of their philosophy is they want freedom from the Chinese Communist Party, and they just think, oh, well, if that means we need democracy, well, okay then,
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Funny coincidence, we all just said yep because Rika sent me a King of the Hill video. I don't know if he intended to it or not, but King of the Hill does have a lot of good, legit moral lessons in it, I think we need to resurrect Cotton. I think we need to resurrect Hank Hill's dad, Cotton Hill, and put him in the South Park universe.
No way.
Yeah, he can give those PC babies a lesson. Teach those PC babies a lesson.
Yeah, they brought back a zombie chef.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, Rika, one of Cotton Hill's last words before he died. I mean, it wasn't his exact last words, but it happened, like only a couple hours before he died. Hank Hill finally says, Dad, you may not have been the best father, but you're still my father, and I love you. And Cotton Hill's answer,
something like that.
You loves me? You loves me? What kind of man says that to another man? I can't die knowing my son loves me.
All right, we finally got Pierre in. Yeah, I think I have the permissions finally straightened out now.
Hello?
Hello. Hello, Pierre. And wow, do you have the stream going in the background there, Pierre?
Yeah, I hear it. Yeah.
Hold on, wait.
That link I sent you is about the earlier topic about parenting nowadays.
Yeah. There actually was an episode of King of the Hill where some parents, try to, do independent parenting, but they do it all wrong and basically let their son do whatever he wants without any consequence. And Bobby gives them he gives them a taste of their own medicine by saying Bobby after them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the problem that a lot of quote unquote independent parents forget wrong. It's yeah, you're supposed to. What you're also ignoring is that they have to face the consequences for those actions. So if they make a bad choice, they have to be punished for that bad choice. That's the whole point of independent parenting. Independent parenting isn't letting your kid do whatever they want whenever they want. It's all about a classic example that often happens. One of the number one reasons why some parents often have fights is because they say, we want you to wear this, for school today, and the kid says, I don't want. I want to wear my pajamas. What we tell people, what an actual person would say, what you're supposed to do is, put some clothes in a bag, give it to them, but let them go in their pajamas and learn the consequence of that. When the kids are saying, why are you wearing pink polka dot pajamas? You look stupid in that, and let them experience that.
Yeah, that's what I did with my daughter. She'd be like, she wanted to wear shorts or skirts or something like that when it's 40 degrees outside. I'm like, well, okay, but if you're too cold, it's your own fault.
Yeah, whereas a lot of PC schools are now saying no. Not only should your kid be allowed to make a choice, you should embrace the choice they make. Well, no, it's just the point.
Yeah, I was tired of my kids only ever wanting to eat chicken nuggets and pizza. I'm like, okay, they've got to have something else. So I told them, it's like, okay, I will have food in the house. I will cook you dinner. You will have 3 choices every night. Your choice will be what I fix for you, what you can go and fix yourself, or going hungry. And my daughter called my bluff on that once because I wouldn't make chicken nuggets or whatever she was wanting. And she went to bed. She was so sure that I was gonna go back there like, oh, I'm so sorry, you're hungry. Here, have some chicken nuggets. And I didn't. And she learned after that. Now there are a lot of those who say, oh, you're a terrible parent. You let your kid go hungry. Well, it didn't do her any harm, and the lesson she learned and the eating habits she picked up were much better.
Yeah, well, I do agree their parenting styles as a whole are outdated and abusive. There were some good things, that your grandparents did that, were good lessons, Well,
I mean, it's all about balance because in the past, they were too punitive. Nowadays they can be too permissive. You got to strike the right balance, and it's very individualized for the child.
Oh, yeah. I think another thing that's also playing a role is the zero tolerance policy in school, because it's like,
oh yeah,
I saw this one person say this one time. You see, and he says, the solution to stopping bullying is you got to get rid of the zero tolerance policy. And the guy said, because you see, back in my days when I was a kid, if you went up to a kid and you said you're a faggot homosexual and you like to suck cocks and hawks and all that, you got your nose broken. But today you can't do that. Yeah.
They're talking about Gab in the chat, going on and on about how you should have to give your ID to the government for permission to watch porn or however that goes. And JC is saying Gab's a honeypot. They only supported free speech when it was convenient to them. But they also exposed Mastodon, because Mastodon was setting them up like, oh, we're a decentralized free speech platform. Everyone can come on. They decided they didn't like Gab, and then you found out how much control they actually had over the platform.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and it's another, and going back to porn, just bring up the child porn, and it's pretty funny because I want to show you because it's child porn and it's wrong. Well, then you look it up and
you're dropping out again.
I was about to say, it's like, that's not childhood porn. That's just Japanese hentai. And I mean, yeah, I've seen my fair share of hentai, and and with the monsters and rape. But here's the thing: at the end of the day,
yeah, you're completely dropping out. We're getting like 2 words here and there. We're just getting 2 words here and there.
Yeah, I'm also probably going to have to get going.
I was just saying, Shane, a lot of the so-called child porn they have Japanese hentai, which is animated drawings.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, people get bent out of shape about drawing, and it's like, it's child abuse. How can you abuse a drawing?
A lot of that hentai can get, it's not, there's no children, it's just a drawing. that scene from SpongeBob where Patrick thinks he sees the maniac. It's like no sign of what we think the maniac looks.
Yep. All right. Well, I'm sorry I couldn't stay for long or talk that much.
Uh,
But
we miss you, Hoplu.
No,
Yeah.
Take care.
Cleveland's gonna leave us.
yeah, I'll try to stay on longer next time. All right. Talk to you later.
See ya.
Bye.
I think it's almost like Discord is behaving like the processor's tied up, but I've got like, 80% or more system idle, so I don't know what it's doing.
Yeah, Discord's been acting weird lately, and I can see why some people are getting concerned about Discord because it has been acting weird lately.
Yeah, but I think a lot
that's-
of it's my computer too. It's just been, I think every now and this with Windows, this is just what you have to happen. You have to wipe everything, reinstall from scratch, which for me is going to be a nightmare because I have to get all of my software and all of my settings and everything else back. I mean, I can do it. It's just going to take time, but that's what I'm going to have to do just because just over time so much crud builds up in Windows.
Yeah.
Like, coming to think of it, I don't think... Because this started out... Did it start out as a Windows 7? I think it started out as a Windows 7 machine. And I did the live update to Windows 10. And all that time, I don't think I've wiped and reloaded it. So it's beyond time for me to do that.
You know what, Shane? Also going back to government, people like to bring up, well, the government invented the internet. If I recall correctly, if the internet was set up, how the private sector originally wanted it, we wouldn't be having these buffering and malware issues because, if I recall correctly, the original basis for the internet was actually much more secure and more.
Well, what they were setting up to route on their own networks in between each other was a 7-layer system called the OSI model. And the model the DoD came up with for the internet was a 4-layer model, and the top 3 layers were compressed into one. So you have an application layer, whereas in the OSI model, it's session, presentation, and application. And session is stuff like logging in and encryption and stuff like that. And then presentation is like working out, the commonalities from the computers. And then the applications were at the top layer and didn't have to be aware of any of that. So we could have had encryption, or at least the capacity for it, from day one. And we could have had universal authentication and not had things like spam and stuff like that.
Yeah, but DoD said no because at the time they were like, oh, it's only gonna be used by a couple of pre-known organizations. It's not like this thing's gonna take off.
Vince Cerf himself said that was their biggest mistake.
That's the opposite.
Not to mention,
Vince Cerf himself, father of the internet, said that was exactly the mistake they made.
And actually, Shane, if I recall correctly, and many people also brought this up, the irony is that when you really think about it, it actually compromised security because the Cold War was still going on when the internet was being developed, and theoretically speaking, if the Soviets found out, what the internet was, and they found a way to get into it, the simple authentication actually would have made it 10 times easier for the Soviets to actually break into it and figure out what's going on. Whereas if we went with the original one in encryption, it would be far harder for them to get into it, even if they knew about it.
Well, yeah, because what they were thinking was, we're just talking about among each other and we're all one big happy family. We want to have everything decentralized and routed so that the Russians couldn't attack one location and take it all down. But the assumption from the internet from day one was if you were on the network, then you were part of the big family and you could do whatever you want and you were completely trusted. And of course, that is not what private companies were doing at the time, because they understood that there were some things that the vice president had to have access to that department heads didn't, and things like that. And they were building technologies with that in place, but the internet had none of that.
So like I said earlier, had the Soviets, found out, the Americans are developing something called the internet, and if the Soviet Union lasted long enough that they found a way to break into it, they would have severely compromised. But then again, it's government. They're actually going back to how government is so, how contrary to what some people believe, the government doesn't have the best security. There was that one guy who was a spy for the Soviets, and he was a higher up in naval intelligence. and he, from what I read, he completely compromised and wrecked, the U.S. Navy's war plants, and they had to spend a lot of money rebuilding the Navy's, war structure from the ground up because of it. And they asked him, in an interview when he was in jail, how did you compromise, the security of the United States Navy? His response: Kmart had better security than the U.S. Navy.
Yeah, J.C. Armitage makes you wonder how much more technologically advanced we'd be without the state. Yeah, way, way more advanced if you've ever read The Probability Broach. I don't think that's all that unrealistic of an alternative. Maybe a few details like, for example, they run everything on fusion power, and it's turning out that fusion is a lot more difficult than they thought back when L. Neil Smith wrote the novel. But for the most part, you have basically an anarchist society that is just so much more technologically advanced. So yeah.
Yeah, actually, Shane, there was that one family.
No, Rhodes wouldn't need him. Yep, they don't need them in The Probability Broach. They all drive hovercrafts, and all they do is just kind of flatten out a place and plant crabgrass, and they just glide over them.
I made that joke with Rika one time. Oh, but who will build the roads? I say, well, the alternative method of transportation, we won't need them anymore.
Well, and if you think about it, what have roads been if not one huge, enormous subsidy to the gasoline-powered automobile industry?
Yeah, and fun.
You are way cutting out there, Darth.
I was about to say that I actually learned are not invented from the ground up. They weren't, something that the government came. If any, they were pavements of concrete. I mean, not on concrete, but pavements of whatever. Missing buffalo trails that have been known for centuries. They were actually based off of what the buffalo were doing, because that's how the.
Yeah, we're getting like two words every now and then. I'm going to try to change the region again.
I was about to say, hang on.
I changed it to Central because I think that's more the region you're in. So maybe if I change it to your region, it'll come back better.
I was just saying, even the roads, they weren't invented by the government. If anything, all they were was they just put asphalt over pre-existing routes that have been known by the American Indians for centuries, because that's how they used to track their buffalo, because they would follow the buffalo migratory patterns. And when the settlers were moving in, they often sought guidance from the American Indians, and they would say, oh yeah, we take this route because that's where the buffalo take, and that's the most convenient route. So those highways and all that, they've been around since as early as America was fully mapped and charted. The only difference is that the only thing the government did was put asphalt over them.
Well, yeah, because you had the Indian trails, and then in the horse and buggy days, people would just put down planks and make them plank roads, and the government didn't do that. It was just everyone just kind of maintained the bit of road that was just kind of in front of their property and used it. And then government said, okay, this is ours. They declared eminent domain over them and all rights of way and started putting down pavement.
So as you said, when it comes to roads, the government just did what we always say. They saw a parade, ran in front and said, hey, we funded the parade because we're leading it.
It's amazing, though, how they always go back to roads as if without government we'd all be standing on our front porches scratching our heads wondering how to get places.
Yeah, and the irony is that I actually see that from a lot of atheists too, and all that, like those atheists, who claim that they debunk religious bullshit, and they talk about how we don't need God to be moral, and then we're like, well, what about government? Oh, but without government, we'll all be violent animals going around raping and killing people and thinking, duh, there's no roads. How do I get from one place to another?
Yeah.
It's the same argument,
Yep.
What you're saying, well, without government, we just be a bunch of dumb cavemen going around raping and killing everybody. That's the exact same thing. The preachers say, well, that's what happens when we don't have God. We turn into a bunch of Nietzsche-style nihilists and we'll go around raping and killing each other.
Yeah, and this is a point, Rika, the hopeful voluntarist, the Rika in the chat room, not the Rika we just had in the voice chat, but Most roads are based on old animal trails. Yeah, animals make roads. When I was growing up, we had a cow pasture in the backyard. A few hundred acres, couple hundred heads of beef cattle. And the part out behind our house was like meadow, and we used to go in there and play in the cow pasture all the time. And then you had this wooded area, and then the barn was over on my uncle's property on the other side of the wooded area. And when we went to play in the woods, we knew we never had to worry about getting lost, because every now and then you just go in one direction or another and you'd end up with a trail that would lead from the meadow to the barn. My uncle didn't make that. The cows did. Just over time, they just kind of hit on like the most efficient way to get from that part over to the barn. And so you hit that trail. Okay, that one way goes to the barn, this other way goes back home.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, don't they even teach? Don't they also teach you that, like in like those scout, training? Like they teach you survival. Like if you ever lost in the woods, look for animal signals, because that can give you an idea of where you are in the woods. Because some animals prefer the interior of the woods, whereas others, like the outerior. So if you see like the droppings of one animal, it can tell you which part of the wood you're in.
Well, and it's stuff like, because deer make trails too, and deer and all sorts of animals make trails down to where the water is. So if you see a deer trail and then you see other trails merging into it, if you follow that, you're probably going to water.
Oh yeah, Or, another good example too is, if you're in a part of the woods and there's farmland nearby, well, a lot of deer, they will go out for the corn. So if you follow them, you might reach to a cornfield, and there you can get that. It's actually, like I said, I think they teach you that in a lot of survival and scouting, schools. They teach you, if you're ever lost in the woods, you don't have a GPS or a compass, look for animal trails, and to a lesser extent plant trails, because even plants leave behind trails that can lead you in the right direction.
Of course, they also had a firearms merit badge. I don't know what other people make of that.
If I recall correctly, a long time ago, taking 22 caliber rifles to the back and shooting them, that used to be a part of gym class.
Yeah, a friend of mine had a muzzle loader, and we used to go into the gully, throw some tin cans into the gully and shoot them.
Yeah.
It was just something we did. No parental supervision. We were like, 14, 15 years old, something like that.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that and all that. And people are scared, about children firing guns and all that. And this one guy, like, who was like in his 60s or whatever, said, so what? When I was a kid, I went out with guns all the time. And I'm not just talking about, a single shot 22 or a muzzle loader. He said, my dad served in World War II in Korea, and he actually brought back his old M1 carbine. And me and my brothers and sisters, we used to take it outside and plink tin cans with it all the time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that would be a great one for smaller children to do because of the low caliber. The first one I fired, my dad had two shotguns. He had a 12 gauge and a 110. I kind of had to work my way up to the 12 gauge, but the 110 wasn't that bad as far as kick and everything.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's funny. Like,
and you're starting to drop again. You were going great for a while, but you're starting to. Maybe I just need to keep changing the region every so often.
I don't know what's up with it. But yeah, it's like, it's the same. I mean, actually, I was bringing this up earlier, but another good example of that people, adults, if we leave children, and they're going to become tribal. Actually, if I recall correctly, Lord of not only in controlled, even in real life, so that they did it was short-lived, where they actually a bunch of kids and they had to form their own community. There was little to no, standby team if like a serious medical condition occurred.
Yeah, I'm not having any more luck with this technique. We're still losing.
I'm surprised it didn't last very long. That must not have been very interesting.
All right.
No, I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know how to fix this.
I was just. People like to use Lord of the Flies as an example about how humans are bad and all that.
That wasn't even remotely realistic.
What?
That wasn't even remotely realistic.
Yeah,
Lord of the Flies.
I don't know if you heard it, but I was people, but there was actually a short-lived reality TV show where they actually put kids, with the oldest kids being 16 and the youngest one being as young as I think 6 years old. They put them in a village, and there was little intervention from adults, aside from the camera crew, and I think they had an emergency medical staff on standby in case things got really serious. And I want to know what the kids did? They didn't evolve into these tribes worshiping, a beast or the Lord of the Flies. They actually founded a somewhat interesting community. And the reason why the show ended up being canceled wasn't because the kids were starving to death. It's because they got homesick and they're like, we're kind of tired of doing this. Can we go home now?
Yeah.
But yeah, they formed their own.
Yeah, well,
community.
there was one where I think it was like a little league or something like that. It was some sports. I think it was baseball, but it got to where like the parents were the coaches and the parents were the umpires, and the parents were like, "Oh no, you got to do this," and they were starting to get like corrupt and everything and making this big deal out of everything. And then you had the other people who were like, "No, no, no, you're doing it this wrong way. You can't keep score or anything like that." And all the friend and the kids basically all got together and like, "Parents, stay out of it. Stay in the bleachers and watch the game. You're not coaching. You're not refereeing. We're just going to do it ourselves. We're going to play. We're going to keep scoring." And we're like, "Oh, but if you don't have coaches, if you don't have an umpire, you won't know what to do, and it'll all degenerate, and you'll have fights, and it'll be Lord of the Flies." And exactly the opposite happened.
Oh,
They
yeah.
were actually a lot more respectful of the rules, and even when one team beat another, the team, they were still friends afterwards. There wasn't any animosity from the losing team.
I think John Stossel did another good example like this, where he was talking about rinkonomics, where he went to an ice skating ring, and he said, everyone was going there and fine and all that, but he decided to experiment. He says, well, what if there was someone who was telling people what to do? And he did that, and he was going around telling people, hey, you're going too fast. You slow down a little bit. You go a little bit faster. And people who were previously skating around the rink with no problem were suddenly falling over each other. Then he said, okay, well, I'm not an ice skater. And he brought Brian Boitano, the famous ice skating champion, to do it. And
what would Brian Boitano do?
Yeah, Brian Boitano, who was an Olympic, ice skating gold medalist. Even, he got the same results when he was telling people, you slow down, you move a little bit faster, you move in a zigzag pattern, you stop ice skating backwards. People were falling down, and when they stopped, people got back in the rhythm, spontaneous order.
Another good one from JC. If children started school at 6 months old and their teachers gave them walking lessons, within a single generation, people would come to believe that humans couldn't learn to walk without the state. So true. So true.
Oh yeah, we see that with school and all that. They're like, oh, but without school, we'll all be a bunch of stupid cavemen eating mud. No. Here's another thing too. Universities, historically speaking, they were only for if you were going to become a politician or a part of the priesthood.
Shane Lackey has said asterisk 410 a couple of times, and I'm not sure what that's all about. So if you want to explain it. Yeah, there's a meaning there. I missed it.
Yeah, well, anyway, to back up what I was saying, universities, historically speaking, if I recall correctly, they were never about pursuing higher education. That's where you went to if you wanted to be a priest or a politician. If you wanted to be a doctor, you didn't go to an 8-year university back in the day. You would go to an already established doctor and say, hey, I want to learn how to treat people with the human body. And if he said, you know what, I think you've got potential. Okay, fine. I'm not going to pay you, but if you come and work with me, I'll teach you everything I know, and then you can become a doctor.
Yeah, you would have the where you'd start out as an unpaid apprentice, and then you go to a journeyman and stuff like.
And one of the reasons why we don't have that anymore is because government came around and said, oh, you can't have apprenticeships and internships because that's exploiting people.
Yeah.
But
well, that had that. When that started happening, it started happening when all these people, screaming about minimum wage and fight for 15. When other people were pointing out, hey, you have unpaid interns on your staff. Isn't that kind of hypocritical? So that's when they started going after the unpaid interns.
Yeah, by the way, Adam Ruins Everything, did an episode about interns and how bad they were. And I think they got, I don't know if it was Tom Horton or someone I know they were on one of your Lord Killian videos. He was that Department of Labor under Bill Clinton. I think I forgot his name though. Robert Reich.
Department
Yeah,
of-
Robert
Oh,
Reich.
Reich.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They
right.
got Robert Reich, and I'm like, oh yeah, wasn't that the guy that didn't he blame free markets on the? Didn't he blame free markets on the European crisis or whatever? I forgot what it was.
Yeah, I don't know.
I also love that one guy. I don't know if it was Tom Thornton or I think it was Tom Thornton, where he was like, "Did you know capitalism killed my father because he died of asbestos?" And you pointed out,
Oh no, you're
yeah.
talking about Tom Hartman.
Oh, Tom Hartman.
Tom Hartman, yeah.
I thought I didn't know if it was Hartman or Thornton, but yeah, it's like, oh yeah, and did you also forget to realize the reason why so many products like ovens and all that had asbestos was because it was required by the state. You had to have an asbestos insulator, otherwise your product was too dangerous.
Being 12019, people think they can't manage currency without the state. Well, if only they would teach money management in school. You know, and this is one of the things my daughter was complaining about, even at the charter school, you know, it's an independently run school, but the state still says this is the curriculum you must do. And like a number of years ago, they made them go over to Common Core, and just everyone hates it. But that's what, there's so many things that she would love to learn about that I've had to kind of supplement, you know, the school on about, you know, and teaching her how to handle money is one of those things, because, you know, she's turned 18, and that means she gets the trust fund that is her share of the settlement from the drunk driving accident we were in. And she was like, I don't know what to do. It's like, I'll go over it with you. I'll teach you all about it. And she said, but we should learn that in school. Like, you should.
I mean, some schools do have, you know, business and financial education, but the problem is that they often teach you the Keynesian style stuff. You know, that's another thing I find so laughable, is when people say, oh, well, you know, I actually am a major graduate of you know, UCLA or whatever, and I have a major degree in economics. And I'm like, oh, what type of economics did they teach you? And all the stuff they show is Keynesian stuff, which has been largely debunked. I mean, even the guy who made Keynesian economics, you know, later in life regretted, you know, some of his philosophies.
Oh, yeah, there was one letter he wrote to someone shortly before he died, saying that more and more he was coming to rely on the invisible hand that he had worked so hard to expunge from things. And there was also an essay he wrote that was published posthumously that was saying that really what he was discovering, that what he had come up with wasn't the general theory like he thought it was. It was a theory that was good for a Depression and wartime era economy. But now that that's over, we have to start thinking about the new economy and what that's going to be, and, you know, how different is that going to be, and what different principles we're going to have. And if he hadn't died, he might have changed his mind on a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I saw an interview with F.A. Hayek, who, despite they disagreed with each other, they were actually pretty close friends with each other. F.A. Hayek said, you know, even though we completely disagreed with each other on politics and economics, we were still very good friends as intellectuals. And he said 6 months before he died, I was talking to him, you know, I was by his bedside and we were talking about that. And he was like, you know, I did read your latest essay and I have discovered you are skeptical about your own theories proposed. You know, if you were to provide with more information, you know, would you completely recant your statement? And apparently Keynes said, oh, yeah, definitely. If I see information that proves that I was completely 100% wrong on everything, then yeah, I'll admit I was wrong and try to convince people to change their mind to get the correct answer. But sadly, he never got a chance to do that because 6 months later, he was dead.
Oh, he's talking about 410 caliber. Apparently I said 110 instead of 410.
Oh, 410, but yeah, 410. That's that shotgun, not shotgun round.
Well, it's just a smaller bore shotgun, and it doesn't have much of a kick to it, so
yeah,
it's better for a 12-year-old to learn on.
Yeah, it's. Yeah, Fishbone says, yeah, most basic economics they teach in school these days is Keynesian, but rarely about Hayek or Friedman. Oh, but that's because Mises supported the Austrian fascist and Milton Friedman supported Chile under Pinochet.
No, we didn't. I think I destroyed that in a recent Tom Hartman.
It's pretty funny. Everyone talks about how it's like, yeah, well, did you know that Pinochet implemented free market capitalism and Chile went to shit in the 1970s, and it wasn't until the 90s that things improved? Yeah, and I did a little look at that, and guess what I learned? In the first 5 years of his reign, Pinochet was actually very interventionist in the economy, and the thing that destroyed the Chilean economy, well, it was already destroyed by Allende, but what made it even worse was, in his mind, he thought the best way to fix everything was, oh, let's print up a bunch of money so we can peg it to the US dollar, which didn't fix anything and only
which
led
never
to
works.
inflation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah, Argentina found that out. I think Brazil's finding that out now. Yeah, it doesn't work.
Nah, Brazil still thinks that if they do it, it'll work. I mean, it's like I don't. That's why
Brazil is the country that proved that indexing wages to inflation just leads to hyperinflation, because that was crazy. Even Brazil learned their lesson there.
Oh yeah, I saw someone say that one time. I actually met a guy who was from Brazil, and I was talking to him about economics, and a lot of people are saying we should adjust the minimum wage, to comply with inflation. And he said, "Oh, come on, they're doing that in Brazil, and that only devalued our wages." Yeah, he was like, it's like, yeah, we're making, 15. I can't remember what the Brazilian currency is, but it's not worth as much anymore because it's inflated.
Let's see.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing people fail to realize about inflation. A common thing that they teach you in school is that inflation is when prices go up. Well, not exactly. Yeah, prices go up, but it's not because the value went up. It's because the value of your money went down.
Well, and the thing about it is, it wasn't like, Pinochet met with Milton Friedman on Monday and then instituted all this free market stuff on Wednesday. It happened over a period of like 2 decades and actually ended up with him, losing power.
Yeah, so. If I recall correctly, contrary to popular belief, the Chicago Boys, they had very little influence. While yeah, he did assign the Chicago Boys, to be in his U.S. government. It wasn't until the 1980s when he actually started listening to them. Before that, he was like, hell no, I'm in charge of Chile now, and I'm going to do stuff my own way.
Well, and there was like one point where Friedman had said something like, wait a minute, I met with him for 45 minutes, and I'm supposed to be this big time with him. I've also met, with the president of China and all Bangladesh and all these other places, and no one ever associates me with communism. So.
Oh yeah. If I recall correctly, he once had a meeting with Joseph Briz Tito, who was, despite what a lot of Yugoslavian nationalists like to say, was quite an asshole himself. Yeah, Tito, that's another political figure who has a cult of personality around him, because he did so much terrible stuff for Yugoslavia, yet there's a lot of, member-bearing old-school Yugoslavian nationalists that are like, oh, but Tito scared away Stalin and he prevented, the Serbians from going around killing everyone. Yeah, you want to know why? You want to know why there was no fighting, in Yugoslavia under Tito? It wasn't because he fixed all the problems. It's because he said, all of you guys, you're going in jail.
Yep.
But that doesn't fix the problem. That's just putting a Band-Aid over it. And once that Band-Aid...
Well, and that was something else that, like, people were saying about the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union and the Soviet bloc, they took over all these countries, and you had all of these, like the ethnic Serbs and, various denominations of Christianity and some Jews and things like that. And, oh, look, they were all fighting before, but look, they're all peaceful now under communism. And then the Soviet Union fell. What immediately happened? These groups started fighting each other again. Because they didn't solve the problem. They just repressed their ability to act.
Yeah, all they did was, like I said, take those radical groups and throw them in prison. But that doesn't solve that,
Yeah, being 1219, it's you don't really implement free market principles. You repeal all the other stuff that government's doing.
That's another thing. Yeah, that's another thing too. I hate about people is when they say, "Oh, but isn't it hypocritical for libertarians to say they don't want to force things onto other people, yet they want to force us to be libertarians?"
I've actually had status say this to me completely unironically. You want to force your freedom on me? It's like, what?
You don't force,
and without a trace of irony.
Yeah, you can't force freedom on people. That would be like consenting, saying I consent to be murdered. You can't consent to murder.
Yeah. If you do, it's called assisted suicide.
Yeah.
I'm going to force you to do what you were gonna do anyway.
Yeah.
I saw a libertarian meme like that. There's plenty of those around, where the status is like, you want to enforce your libertarian principles on me, and the guy says, yeah, how dare I force you to live your life the way you think is appropriate for yourself.
Libertarians diligently plotting to take over the world is so they can leave us all alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Taking over the world so we can leave you alone.
Yeah, like that one really cringy, guy that tried to criticize Gary Johnson by saying Gary Johnson wants to fight government power by becoming government power. And it's like, yeah, and if I recall correctly, New Mexico did rather well under him because he didn't do anything as governor. He admits that, he jokingly tells people, how did you make New Mexico so successful? He said, simple, I didn't do anything. Well,
Yeah, he created all those jobs by not creating jobs. Because it's not politicians who create jobs.
Yeah, the only thing he did under, as New Mexican government was he vetoed stuff, and he actually bragged about how many bills he vetoed, and
they called him Governor Veto.
Yeah, and if I recall correctly, he actually, told a funny list of a lot of the bills he vetoed. Like, for instance, one bill he had, which was pushed in by the animal rights people, was that they wanted to pass a law forcing pet owners and all that to, mandatory exercise routines for that. And he says, well, I'm against that not only on principle, but also how the hell are you going to enforce that?
Yeah. What the hell happened to him in 2016, man? That was like a whole different person then. I think it was Bill Weld. He just kind of fell in with the wrong crowd, and Weld is horrible.
It's, that's why I kind of agree that there is, to an extent, a deep state and all that, because to be fair, there are, from what I've heard from people, there are legitimately good people in politics, and, they aren't narcissistic idiots, but it's like once they get in there, it's like something changes in them, and I highly doubt it's all because, that was their secret motivation entirely. I do think that it's just that environment,
Well, I think most of them, well, that, like, if you look at all of the people who are administering, Medicaid, unemployment benefits, things like that, all the people who actually work in the offices doing that, I think that pretty much all of them are doing it because they honestly want to help people, and they're honestly doing their best to try to help people. They're just in a system that it is so screwed up, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, like that one doctor, for in the UK, from that debate, he was talking about, how it's like, look, NHS doctors are some of the best people in the world, and we're trying everything we can, but because of the system, the way it's set up, we can't, operate to our fullest capacity. And he's like, and historically, all they wanted to do was, all you guys have been doing is just throwing money, but we know that doesn't work. What's your solution? And like you said, the Labor Party guy said, oh, we'll throw more money at that. And the other guy was like, oh, we'll do something.
No, he was saying, they were both saying throw more money at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. There ain't a lick of difference between them any more than there's a lick of difference between the Republicans and Democrats.
I mean,
it's the same story, different country.
I mean, I do give, the new UK Prime Minister kudos, for putting his foot down on leaving the European Union and all that, but everything other than that, yeah, he's...
Well, considering that's the entire reason why he was elected.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he was elected because basically his promise was...
Oh man, there was one thing on the BBC, this debate they were having, and it was on Brexit, and of course they had the panel that was, so the full of the Remainers, and then you had like the couple of, token Brexiters who weren't really Brexiters, but they were just kind of milquetoast about it. And oh man, the audience was just hammering them on Brexit. It's like, look, if nothing else, we voted on it. You say you're for democracy. We voted to leave the European Union. 3.5 years later, we're still in there. Just leave.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, the audience was just letting them have it.
Oh, yeah. I ain't gonna lie, some of those political debates are kind of cringy because it's like, you see these people bringing up pretty good valid questions, and it's pretty clear the audience knows more than's going on, and politicians are they're either completely clueless, and generally they have two responses, to a question. It's either they're gonna say they're gonna throw more money at it, or they say, when I'm elected, we'll talk about it more.
Boris Johnson was a one-nation conservative. I'm not sure what that means, but being 1219 points out the selfish case for libertarianism, and then the altruist case. Really, they're the same thing.
Oh yeah.
When you have a voluntarist society where the only actions permitted between people are what they're willing to engage in voluntarily, being selfish and being altruistic are the same thing in that situation.
I'm going to say this, Shane. I used to be an objectivist, not anymore, but one thing I still kind of agree with the Ayn Rand on is that I think at our core, humans are not, pure altruistic. I think deep down, everything we do is for some quote unquote selfish intention. Everything we do is for that, whether it's for money, a favor in return, or hecky, I could even argue that warm fuzzy feeling you get on the inside from helping someone, that's a selfish intention. You do it because you feel good about yourself from helping other people. We don't do things because we know it's right. We do it because it feels good, because we know what we're doing is right. So everything's done through selfish intentions.
Yeah, Churchill was another example of a one-nation concern. I still don't know what that means, but I will say Churchill, the British practically worship Churchill. And, he presided over the victory in World War II, and he made all these great speeches. Other than that, if you look at what the guy did, he really wasn't all that great.
Yeah, if I recall correctly.
Sorry, Pierre. Sorry you couldn't participate more, but he had mic problems.
Yeah, I was about to say a lot of a lot of people seem to ignore about Winston Churchill is that if I recall correctly, he used World War II as an example, as a means to hide, some of the shady stuff he was doing, such as because a lot of nations were taking advantage of World War II to try to violently, gain independence, and the British Empire was more or less using genocidal tactics to put them down, and people ignored that. And when people brought it up, he said, "Oh yeah, they were conspiring with Hitler, so we had to put them down like that," which is actually what happened.
Fish, giving us another example doesn't work. You're going to have to explain what a one-nation conservative is. We're not British here, so we don't know the term.
I don't agree with everything Margaret Thatcher did, but it's pretty funny because she did do a lot of good thing with the United Kingdom, and everyone hates her for it because they were convinced, it's like, oh, Margaret Thatcher took away power from the people. No, she took away power from politically connected people.
Yeah, well, and it's just crazy because the thing I've been hearing basically in this past decade, and it's just over and over, is, oh, well, she's responsible for the winter of discontent, that horrible labor dispute, because no, that was before she was elected. In fact, that was why she was elected.
Yeah, I've actually saw a video from an older guy, a really old British gent, like he was in his 70s, and he says the reason why a lot of people hate Margaret Thatcher was because they were too young to remember what happened before Margaret Thatcher. And he said before Margaret Thatcher, a lot of labor unions and certain, industrial and in certain industrial corporations, they were so powerful and had so much money in the British economy that literally, if there was any labor dispute that happened, it would literally shut down commerce as it is, because legally you had to become a member of the union, and if the union decided they wanted to go on strike, everyone had to participate or risk losing their jobs. So it shut commerce down. And all Margaret Thatcher said is, she didn't say you can't unionize, she just said it stops right here. You can still be in a union, but you no longer have political support anymore.
Yeah, talking about the NHS in the chat and how they practically worship it there, even though it's really awful. This is another, like what I was saying earlier, the doctors and the nurses and everyone else who works at the NHS, they truly want to do best for their patients. And we have seen case after case after case where not only individual doctors and surgeons, but like entire groups of them, entire like membership organizations of them have, come out and given press conferences and written open letters and stuff like that, just basically begging them to do something about these systemic problems that cannot be solved by just throwing more money at it.
Yeah.
And there's just nothing. And it's just, I mean, the thing that really got me was the whole baby Charlie thing that we kept covering on the podcast as it unfolded.
Yeah, they say, they refused, to give him.
Yeah, the parents had a doctor. The parents had a doctor lined up in America to do the procedure to save his life. They'd raised the money on GoFundMe, but the NHS and the courts still wouldn't let them go. And
because baby Charlie had to die with dignity.
Yeah, well, and the horrible thing is, on all of the stories on it, on all of the online stories where they had comments and all the British people commenting, oh my God, it was just like the NHS was made of gold and it was manna from heaven and they were all priests and saints and they could do no wrong and that was the only thing they could do with this baby and there was no hope for it. They were just going to take the baby off to be tortured or whatever,
I actually read one of those things and there was actually a comment, where the NHS
and you're dropping out again.
There's nothing you can do, so clearly they were in the wrong and they were causing unnecessary.
I'll switch to a different server region and it'll work for a while and then you start dropping out again. Let me go back to South and see what happens. All right, try it again.
A lot of people like to make fun of the U.S. healthcare, like a common joke I see in a lot of goes, to the hospital, and then they're asked,
Nah, you're still dropping out.
I don't have insurance, and then they throw them out of the hospital.
Yeah, that never happens.
But we do see that happening in NHS countries where the government takes over everything.
Yeah. In America they treat you and then they bill you. That's what they do.
Yeah. And if you legitimately cannot afford to pay it, if you don't have insurance, and the medical procedure that they're going to prescribe to you is way beyond board, what they often will do is they'll move you to a charity ward that'll give you treatment. It may not, but it's still treatment and it's usually effective, and it costs a charity ward. Yeah, they don't just throw you out because you can't afford to pay for it, because when you really think about it, it's like, yeah, you're not going to make a profit, if the person can't pay, but if you kick someone out because they can't afford to pay, that's going to make you look bad, and people are going to say, oh, fuck that hospital, I'm not going there.
Well, and all they want is just some idea that you're working on paying it. You work out a payment system for it or something. And I mean, they'll be willing to settle for pennies on the dollar. They're not going to bankrupt anyone because of it. The stories you hear of that, like, oh, there was this couple and now they're bankrupt and they lost their home and everything because they went after them. When you dive into stories like that, there was like this one couple I'm thinking of where they went after them because they couldn't pay their hospital bill. Well, it turns out they had purchased a BMW, I think it was, with cash.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So if you're going to do that and you're not paying your hospital bill, then yeah, they're going to come after you.
Actually, my mom likes to watch My 600-Pound Life, and, I kind of see that a lot and all that, where the doctors will often refuse, to grant, gastric bypass surgery and liposuction to people that big and all that, and, until they lose a little bit of weight. And people were thinking, well, that's abusive and all that. It's like, well, they do it for two reasons. One is because it's actually dangerous to perform surgery on someone who's morbidly obese like that. But two, and another thing is that they want to make sure that if you're that determined to lose weight, that you're going to stick with the lifestyle changes, because contrary to popular belief, gastric bypass surgery and liposuction, they're not miracle pills. They don't keep you thin. They just give you a short-term thin, but the long-term thinness is up to you. And a lot of doctors are like, I am not going to.
It's about your lifestyle and your activity, and you're just gonna go back to that equilibrium weight where you were before.
Yeah, I've actually heard the same thing, to a lesser extent with organ transplant patients, and this is another reason why people hate the waiting list. Is I've actually heard from some doctors say, I hate it when I have to perform a liver transplant on a guy whose liver is completely destroyed because he was an abusive alcoholic, but he's pretty clearly showing no signs of, of repentance, and he's going to go back to drinking again once I cure him, but we're doing it anyway because, well, he's on the list and we have to treat him. And it's like that's not fair. There are people that have uncontrollable liver conditions that they really need liver transplants for, but we can't because the government says, oh no, you can't sell or use organs, so you have to rely on a waiting list. And some of the people who are on the waiting list now, I'm not saying they don't deserve to die, but they kind of sort of brought it on themselves with their unhealthy lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, there's got to be some room for personal responsibility there.
Yeah,
Yeah, the whole waiting list thing sounds like it's like you have a limited supply of healthy organs for transplant. Therefore, the most sensible thing to do is essentially go into triage, which is what the gastric, the thing you were saying before about the gastric bypass and thing. That's essentially triage because you have a limited amount of surgeons. Partly that's the fault of the AMA, but I think you would have this problem anyway. Even if you had like zero regulations, I think you would have a small number of doctors who basically made their money doing that. It's like, well, if you want to be really fat and pay for it, fine, I'll take your money. But yeah, and you're still going to get triage in that sort of situation. With the waiting list thing, it sounds like you have this mandated waiting list, and everyone on there has to have a transplant, even though someone waiting.
Yeah,
for
it's rationing.
It's rationing instead of triage.
Right.
Yeah, that's another thing too. Is contrary to popular belief, I've heard in many cases it's not because there's a shortage of organs anyway. It's just that oh well, we gotta make sure everyone's treated fairly and all that. And this really pisses me off is because I have a very dear friend who is more or less dying, and he thinks he's gonna die. And I said, well, why are you gonna die? And he says, well, because I have a shoddy liver and kidney, and I can't get a transplant because that's gonna be 2 years. And my doctor flat out says, if you don't get a transplant soon, you're gonna be dead within like 8 months to a year. And he looked it up and he applied for it, and the waiting time for combined is gonna be 2 years, and it's too late for that. Even if he does miraculously get a kidney, halfway into it, the damage can already be done.
But as I said in How to Argue for Universal Healthcare, we know the solution. Allow people to sell their organs.
Yeah, I've actually suggested that to him. I'm like, look, I mean, I don't know about your liver, but you might be able to expand your life with your kidney if you can scrap up enough cash, go to Iran, because that's like the only country in the world where you can legally buy a kidney from a hospital and have a doctor transplant it into you.
Yeah. Well, they did it in the Philippines for a while, and it was great. It was actually a tourist destination for, medical tourists needing transplants. And then they said, oh, no, this is, immoral, all the stuff they said because it's, taking advantage of the poor or whatever. And so they banned it. And guess what? It wasn't too long after they banned it that they've got the same shortage of organs that everyone else does.
And this is actually a reason why, and this is actually a legitimate criticism I've heard of, is that the biggest problem with the organ.
Yeah, you're dropping
a lot
again.
of the organizations, a lot of the state-sponsored organizations, from what I've heard, they're not the most questionable sources, is because people who really need transplants transplant them, they just use it for medical research for.
I think switching the server region only works temporarily.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what it is, but it does imply at least that it's not a problem on my end like I was thinking. I don't know. We'll see what happens after I rebuild the system. I might do a Christmas live stream to kind of celebrate getting everything back up and running.
Yeah.
And we'll see how well it works then.
It's quick. If you don't mind me asking, does Australia have the same?
No, we don't. We have I don't know. It's there are most of the hospitals and such, but they are still private hospitals, and will still charge except we run the Medicare system. Our Medicare system is essentially a rebate system. So I still have to pay up. It's just that, a week and a half later, I get like Medicare pays back in my bank account.
Yeah,
And
actually,
I get statements as well. I've got a statement from the last time I went to my general practitioner, which is sort of like a family doctor kind of thing. We have a lot of family doctors because you can still start, like, if you're a doctor, you can still start at your own clinic and all that. But
yeah.
I've got a statement right here. I know exactly how much I paid and how much the rebate's going to be, which I hear is a real problem in America because you have no idea how much you're paying because the insurance companies don't tell you, the hospitals don't tell you, the government sure as hell isn't going to tell you, and that's why everything's starting to become a lot more expensive.
The hospitals in many cases don't even know how much it costs.
Or the doctor's. I told my doctor how much I was getting billed, and he was shocked. His jaw hit the floor. He had no idea.
Yeah,
I was being billed, and it's like, oh my god, really? If the government makes healthcare any more affordable, it's going to bankrupt me.
Yeah, I've actually saw that on an episode of John Stossel one time. He actually talked to a guy, who said, he was trying to be more free market with his decision. And he said, the biggest problem I had is I didn't know how much it was going to cost me. And he's like, I contacted the doctor. The doctor didn't know how much it costs. So I contact, the government agency and responsible for some of this management. They didn't know what it cost. So finally I contacted the insurance company directly, and they had to go through several different people, and almost none of them knew how much it costs. And the few that did only knew a fraction of what it costs. And the problem was that it got so spread out that nobody knew anything because it was so distributed out there that, like, people only had incomplete answers. Like, they were like, okay, well, I know this will cost, this much, but I don't know how much this will cost. So if it sounds confusing, well, it is.
Yeah. I think that's why the Australian system hasn't gone haywire like the NHS or America is because I have to pay up front, which sort of puts a hard.
You get a bill, and the government ends up
because I still have to pay for it before I get the rebate.
Well, and the government pays you back, but you see how much it costs. You understand up front. Most people who have, insurance or Medicaid or whatever, they have no clue. They go like, "Oh, it's free." Well, it's not free.
Yeah, I mean, actually,
no, it's not free. It's not free. I paid $85 up front for my last GP visit. I mean, I got like half of it back through Medicare.
It's crazy.
I paid $85.
It's crazy because before Obama, I could go and see the doctors, and a doctor's visit would cost me $65, something like that. And now it costs over $200, and because I take opioids for my chronic pain, I don't just see the doctor once a year like everyone else. I have to see him every 3 months. So I'm getting that $200 bill every 3 months. I have to pee in a cup to prove that I'm not an addict, and they charge me $90 for that.
Oh yeah, and of course people are pulling the Kafka trap, saying, "Oh, Shane, you're an addict." Well, no, I'm not an addict, and I take those pills because if I don't take them, then I'll be in a catastrophic amount of pain. And they're like, "That proves you're an addict because only addicts experience catastrophic pain if they don't get their drugs."
Oh God, what is it they're talking about? Is it what's it called? Buprenorphine, something like that. It's a partial opioid antagonist that it can work for pain relief and to help satiate an opioid addiction, but if you take more of it, it doesn't give you a buzz or anything like that. And so it's really effective in helping people who are addicted to opioids, help them get off of it and help them control their addiction. And now they're talking about how bad it is, and they need to ban it, and they need to restrict it, and they need to limit the amount that doctors are prescribing. It's like, what do you assholes think you're doing?
Actually, Shane, that reminds me of this funny thing I saw one time where a guy comes across a genie, and the genie agrees to grant him a wish and all that. And, this guy, he lost, his father and several friends, to alcohol-related incidents, whether it was cirrhosis or car accidents. And he really wants people to stop drinking, but he knows prohibition doesn't work. So he figures out the perfect solution for how I can destroy alcohol once and for all without actually banning it. And the genie's like, "Oh, well, how are you going to do that?" He says, "I wish that human beings could no longer get drunk or intoxicated from drinking alcohol." And then he's like, well, how's that going to work? And then it shows a chart later. Alcohol sales drop down rapidly because, let's face it, getting drunk is part of the reason why you drink. Because most alcohols, last time I checked, they taste awful, and most people know that, but that's not why you drink it.
So, being 12 and 19 is asking, and this was for Pipsqueak, I presume, is Australia decent in terms of healthcare or in general? When he answers, keep in mind Australia is the 5th freest economy in the world, and America is like 14 or something. So,
Yeah.
so tell us, Pip.
Well, yeah, I mean, we do have parallel systems. We have the public system, which is all government-owned.
And he's dropping.
We have a problem with rationing that's getting worse because we have more. We have the age problem and demand for healthcare and all that, but we also have a private system which is fairly expensive. But because I have private healthcare with the Medicare stuff, I get told exactly how much I'm paying and how much my insurance costs down because I can actually directly compare between insurance. I have private insurance, which I do. I actually, which is the tax that supports Medicare, off of the public system, so there's not as much pressure on it.
Yeah, you're dropping out.
Specifics,
Yeah,
I
we
haven't
got
looked
part of
into
that.
it too much, but yeah, and the private system doesn't have limits or restrictions as the American system. Like I heard, like insurance companies to have like mandatory 87, even if that kind of coverage does not apply.
Yeah, we're only getting a few words here and there. I actually tried
really?
changing
God
the server to Australia, and it didn't improve things. But I do know,
how much did
JC,
you get?
Australia does have a minimum wage. Yeah. Well, we heard like there are private and public options, and the private like you pay for, but at least you know how much. But Medicaid still covers it or something.
No, both with private and public. If whether or not you pay with insurance or Medicare, you get a statement saying this is exactly how much you paid, this is how much you're getting on Medicare, or this is how much your insurance company paid. But if you have private insurance, you also get to claim tax back on your Medicare levy, which is the tax that funds Medicare. So
Okay.
it's an incentive for people to get off of the public system.
So if whatever you pay for medical expenses, you deduct for the amounts you would pay in Medicare tax.
No, it's if you actually have private insurance, you tell the Australian Tax Office, I have private insurance, and they reduce your Medicare levy.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And what's the deal with like insurance companies in America like having to put mandatory coverage on plans? I saw video.
Oh yeah, there's all sorts of rules that
it was Remy from Reason TV did one of his parody songs on like comparing insurance plans to toppings on pizza. It's like, why would I get a pizza with 87 toppings, that half of which I don't even need or want?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's all these crazy sorts of. Not only does the federal government have all sorts of crazy restrictions on them, the states do too. Some of the states get really bizarre and strict and want them to cover acupuncture and crap like that. And it is against the law to buy an insurance plan from another state.
Oh yeah. That's the thing I have with my dad, because my dad understands, there's problems with healthcare, but he thinks that part of the problem is with government, because when I brought up, the problems with the NHS, he's like, yeah, well, the same thing happens in the US. And I'm like, well, Dad, that's because the US is trying to be like the NHS. They're trying to make this.
Yeah, JC, I've been looking at like StreamYard and Mumble and stuff like that. And well, the thing is, though, when I do this as a benefit for the supporters, as soon as they pay, they automatically get assigned roles in Discord. And so they just get access to the VC and they can go in there at any time, really, even when we're not live streaming. And I mean, I'll check out other options, of course, but I mean, the Discord is really the one where it's easiest to set up. So maybe it'll make a difference after I rebuild my system, or maybe something else has to happen. I don't know.
John Oliver said Australia is so much better than the US. Michael Moore agreed. Yeah, that's because they probably have a false image of Australia. They think Australia does what the UK does, and they say, "Oh yeah, everything's given to you for free."
Oh no, absolutely not. We don't even
Yeah.
we don't even do some of the things that US does. Like the US requires emergency, like what was it? What's the emergency ward called in? Sorry,
Just the emergency room is what we call
yeah,
it.
it's like the ER. Doesn't the US require ER to treat everyone that comes in?
Yep.
Like if you want that kind of treatment, you have to go to a government-owned hospital in Australia. Like private hospitals in Australia will charge you for that kind of thing. But like that's also a good thing because I know like if I have like a serious emergency and I need an ambulance here, like right now, I can ring up any private hospital, even if they don't have a direct deal with my insurance. Any private hospital's like, how much will it cost to get an ambulance out here as soon as possible? And they go, and they'll tell me the price. Like, right, good, send it, I'll pay you.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean the emergency rooms have to take you, regardless of whether you can pay. But of course, what that does is it just makes it more expensive for the people who do pay because they have to subsidize the ones that don't. And so, two aspirins.
Massive spike in demand.
Yeah, well, and so 2 aspirins end up costing $8, and stuff like that.
Not to mention, it also leads to what Pipsqueak said. It leads to everyone calling, the emergency room, because it's like, oh, I woke up and I've got a really nasty paper cut and it's oozing a little bit of pus. I think I've got a serious infection, and the result is more people come in, but there's not enough doctors to supply that, and you get doctors that are working, 20-hour shifts.
Yeah. Well, because you also, at least in the U.S., have a shortage of doctors because of the AMA and all the stuff they do.
Speaking of
health, so you have like government requirements on hospitals make demand spike, and then you have the restriction on supply. It's like no wonder healthcare is so damn expensive.
Yeah.
Also, a little off topic, but speaking of Australian healthcare, Pipsqueak, I heard there's a super flu going on in Australia right now.
I hadn't heard that.
I haven't heard that.
Oh, well, my friend I was telling you about, his name's Lieutenant Knives. His wife works for a hospital, and she got sick now, but she was being overworked because apparently there was some big flu.
Well, I mean, flus go around hospitals.
Oh yeah,
that's what they do. Oh God, I think it was the year before last, or I think it was last year actually. H5N3, I think it was, just swept through North Carolina, and everyone got sick, and I was the only one in my house who didn't get sick, and I was the only one who had the flu shot, and guess what? My wife got the flu shot with me this year because she didn't want it again. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, that's the one down.
Yeah, you're cutting out again.
And everyone else gets sick, and now you gotta take care of.
Well, it's like a few years ago, my nephew got H1N1, and I mean, he's always been, healthy as a horse, never gets sick, strong, athletic, fit, lean, all that sort of stuff. And H1N1 just smacked him down for like a week, and he said after that, "Yep, every year I'm getting my flu shot." Yeah.
Wait,
people think you sound like Jordan Peterson, Darth. I'm not seeing that myself, but.
Yeah, I know. They're not the first. Everyone says I sound like. Yeah, I don't know. And going back to what you said about the flu, yeah, measles in a lot of cases. People are like, people. Childhood illness. What's the worst that's going to happen? It's like people. The flu isn't like a cold where you just show up to work and you're sneezing and coughing a lot. From what I've heard to people, it's bad. It has a lot of symptoms in common with a cold, but 10 times. Yeah, one person jokingly said the flu will do 2 one of two: either it'll kill you or it'll make.
You're really dropping out now.
Oh, I was just saying.
And is it just me, or is anyone else hearing something that sounds a bit like silverware clinking?
Oh, sorry. I was eating dinner. That's why I've been muting it. I'm muting myself. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm wondering if those extraneous sounds are causing it to mute or something, because a lot of them do that when they compress it.
Sorry I unmuted myself. But yeah, I was about to say. I was just saying, earlier the whole thing with the flu. A lot of people have jokingly told me that the flu will do one of two things to you. It'll either kill you or it'll make you wish it had killed you.
Mm.
Because you're in so much pain and suffering that you're just like, you know what? Just kill me, flu. Just kill me. I can't take it anymore.
Well, that's how it was. I think 3 or 4 years ago, I had an ear infection. And I mean, it was horrible. I could barely hear anything. Like our TV in our bedroom, when Heather and I watch, we usually have the volume on 9. To hear it, I had to crank it up to 34. That's how bad my hearing was. My left ear was ringing so hard, I couldn't even relegate it to the background. It was so annoying. And this went on for more than 2 weeks, as we went through 4 different antibiotics, trying to find one that would knock this thing down. And I mean, that's a real problem with the FDA, because they're not releasing any truly new antibiotics. They're all just tweaks to the old ones, because every time I was reading about this a few months ago, someone had come up with this great new way of doing an antibiotic. I think there was one of the pharmaceutical companies in connection with the University of Chicago, and they had this amazing new prospective antibiotic that worked in a completely different way and could potentially, get all of the ones that were resistant, but they're having to study it in France.
Oh yeah, and actually the same thing happens with antivirals. People, contrary to popular belief, there is medicine. There is quote unquote antibiotics for viruses. They're just operate differently. But the reason why there's not a lot of them, and the few that are around are ineffective, is because, like I said, because of all this government regulation, it's next to impossible to develop new ones. And the ones we currently have that are semi-effective, we're barely using them because we're afraid of creating superbugs.
Shane Lackey, flu shots do not contain the flu. They are recombinant. They're not live attenuated.
Yeah, that's. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, they do contain the virus or bacteria, but.
Well, no, they don't. They're recombinant. They just take the protein silhouette, whatever they call it.
Oh.
Yeah.
I always thought that the best way to put it. I always thought that that vaccines were basically, it's the virus or the bacteria, but it's basically been castrated. So
well, that's the live attenuated. If you get your tetanus booster, that's live attenuated.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are some that work like that, but there are others that are recombinant, and the flu vaccine is recombinant.
That's the reason why when you get a DTaP vaccine, your arm feels sore and numb for a while, because that's basically what it is. The tetanus bacterium is still alive. It can still wiggle around and do stuff. It either can't reproduce, or it reproduces so slowly that by the time it can theoretically get you sick, your immune system's already developed antibodies for it.
You've basically given your arm a very mild case of lockjaw, is what you've done. Yeah. But I mean, others don't like. But it's like if you look at the way they do polio, because the big polio vaccine that works, it gives you lifelong immunity, is live attenuated. But it is possible, and I mean, we're talking 2 or 3 cases a year, but it is possible in some countries where they're really pushing, the polio vaccine to try and stop it, that people do get polio from the vaccine type. But like I say, it's just a small handful. But the thing to do, and the thing that they do in most countries, is when you're small, they give you a recombinant vaccine, which only gives you a temporary immunity for a few years, but a couple of years later, you will have almost complete immunity to polio. So that's when they give you the second one, that's the live attenuated. And you won't actually get the polio from that because you've still got the immunity from the previous one, and then that new one gives you the lifelong immunity.
Yeah.
But-
Yeah, and actually, Shane, this makes me just goes to show that the government thinks science fiction is real. Is fun fact: the guy who developed the smallpox vaccine, he wants the final samples of smallpox to be destroyed completely. He wants them destroyed. He
Yeah.
wants the governments to get together, take their samples they have, and destroy them. But the government's like, oh, but if it comes back or a country that doesn't destroy creates a super bug, we'll have no samples to create a vaccine from. And it's like, people, contrary to what you might read in a post-apocalypse movie, it's impossible to make an illness immune to antibiotics.
Well, and I mean,
well,
they're
not
worried about
antibiotics, I mean antibodies. I mean,
they're worried about some crazy people creating a new strain of smallpox and releasing it. But as long as it's been since, I think I was like basically the last generation that got the smallpox vaccine. They stopped it in like somewhere around 1980, I think. But anyway, by now, whatever they're using to create the new smallpox, the vaccine wouldn't be effective for it anyway because it'll be a different strain.
yeah, and here's another thing too. When I was having this discussion and we were talking about Stephen King's The Stand, like how did a flu, cause most of the world to die out? And the explanation was, well, Captain Trips, the bioweapon, it
Yeah, you're dropping out
immune
again.
to antibodies. People were pointing out, it was that actually would destroy Captain Trips from being a viable. The moment if it's immune to antibodies, the moment you would going to die within a matter of hours, and he's going to have no opportunity to spread it.
Yeah, I didn't catch much of that, but it was basically about a bug being immune to antibodies. So that's what makes AIDS so terrible, is because it attacks T cells directly.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing that Yersinia pestis, which is the bubonic plague, that's what it does. And I mean, it ravaged through and killed like 2/3 of Europe because it's attacking the immune system directly.
But it's not, not immune to antibodies. It's just attacking your immune system.
Right.
So it can't.
Well, I mean, yeah, you would give them, you just give them IV antibiotics and you can knock it out. But I mean, it's coming back in California, areas of Southern California. The plague's coming back, and yeah, it's getting terrible down there.
And part of the problem about the viruses coming in to California has nothing to do with of and all that. It's actually been shown that it's actually ironically caused by.
Yeah, you're really dropping out.
I was about to say.
You're dropping out.
Because there's a lot of homeless people in California, and because of the strict rules, they can't build housing for these homeless people, so they hang out in parks and all that, where they're getting exposed to squirrels and all that, which carry the viruses and bacteria that create hantavirus and bubonic plague.
Yep, non-human vectors, that can be a that can be a real thing.
Correctly, when the homeless people were coming down with the plague, they actually traced it back, and they said that's where they found it. They were getting it from squirrels.
Yeah.
And the reason why
you look at rabies, or the reason why malaria is so difficult to fight in places where it's rampant is because the vector is a mosquito, not other humans.
Yeah,
All right, it's 10 o'clock, so we have to
water over swamps or use chemicals to kill large populations of mosquitoes anymore. Thanks, environmentalists. You just caused a resurgence of malaria and yellow fever.
I actually read that, Pitsqueak. I heard that like in the 1960s, yellow fever and malaria, it was actually declining in a lot of parts of Africa, as well as a lot of other insect vector illnesses. But then in the 1970s, people were like, "Oh, DDT kills pretty birds, so we have to completely ban it." Even though the problem wasn't the chemical itself, it was just we were spraying too much of it. So we outright banned it. And what happened? The mosquitoes and bugs came back, and the few that came back, they developed a resistance to the chemicals because we stopped using them. And now they're going around spreading, their illnesses, and we literally have nothing to fight them now because they're immune to DDT, and we can't make any new chemicals because that's bad for the environment.
But isn't it funny how they always seem to do that thing once we eliminate it? Because we basically don't have malaria in America anymore because of all that stuff. And I mean, it was pretty extreme. Yeah, they didn't have to do that much to do it. But it wasn't until after they didn't have to worry about getting malaria anymore, then all of a sudden, oh, we need to ban DDT.
Yeah, and the funny thing about DDT is that a lot of the dangers they did say about it were largely exaggerated. Like animals, but again, that was from overspraying, not the chemical itself. And they were also making claims saying that oh, it was giving people terminal uncurable cancer. And it's like, and John also brought this up, it's like people used to literally spray it on you. There used to be a truck that would literally spray you with a hose with this stuff, and almost nobody got cancer from that.
Yeah, I mean, it was extreme the way they were doing. I mean, there's film of like families sitting in the park for a picnic, and they're just spraying all this DDT just right over them and right over the picnic blanket and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was really extreme the way they were doing it here.
Yeah, fun fact, the guy who co-founded Greenpeace, he actually left the movement because of how crazy the environmentalists got.
Yeah. All right, it's after 10, so we need to be wrapping it up. Any
Okay,
final thoughts?
I need to go anyway.
Okay, well, thanks for participating. Thanks for being a supporter. You got anything else to say, Pip, before we sign off?
No, not really.
Okay, well, I'm just going to say thanks for participating again. Thanks to Pierre for making the attempt, and Rika and Hoplu and everyone else who joined, and everyone in the chat, and of course, everyone else who has supported, and you for listening. So until next time, stay strong and be